He was the Phantom of the boardroom, a ghost in a bespoke suit who vanished into thin air, leaving behind a $20 billion crater where a titan of German finance once stood. His final message to colleagues was a masterclass in deception, delivered with the same cool confidence that had mesmerized a nation's financial elite for over a decade. He was flying to the Philippines, he assured them. He would personally track down the missing 1.9 billion euros and restore order. It was a promise made by a man who knew the money was not there, because it had never existed. He was not flying east to find a lost treasure. He was flying into the geopolitical shadows he had so carefully cultivated. To understand the scale of the collapse, you must first understand the myth he helped build. The company was Wirecard, and it was not just another firm. It was supposed to be Germany's answer to Silicon Valley, a fintech powerhouse destined to lead Europe into a new technological golden age. It ascended to the country's most prestigious stock index, the DAX 30, pushing aside legacy institutions like Commerzbank. Its market capitalization soared at its peak, eclipsing that of the mighty Deutsche Bank. Investors, politicians, and regulators all bought into the dream. They saw a visionary leader in its CEO, Markus Braun. But the real power, the true engine of this elaborate fiction, was the man operating behind the scenes, the chief operating officer, Jan Marsalek. Marsalek was never a typical executive. He moved between worlds, equally comfortable discussing quarterly earnings reports and the chemical composition of nerve agents like Novichok. He boasted of deep connections to intelligence services across the globe, from Austria and Germany to Russia and Libya. He would allegedly carry classified documents into meetings to intimidate auditors and silence internal dissent. This was his true genius, wrapping a massive financial fraud inside a cloak-and-dagger mystique. He made the business so complex, the offshore partnership so opaque, that challenging the numbers meant challenging a man who seemed to operate beyond the normal rules of business and law. The hunt for Jan Marsalek, therefore, is not just about recovering stolen billions. It is about unraveling a conspiracy that blurs the line between corporate crime and international espionage. As of today, he remains one of the world's most wanted fugitives, a ghost in the global machine. We uncover the greatest financial mysteries and corporate collapses of our time, delving deep into the stories of the architects behind these monumental deceptions, to make sure you never miss an investigation into the figures who manipulate our world from the shadows of high finance. Subscribe and empower yourself with the knowledge of how these vast, intricate schemes truly operate. Every great conflict has its opposing forces. In this story, the battle was not fought on a physical field, but in the digital ledgers of a global corporation and on the pages of the world's most respected financial newspapers. On one side was Jan Marsalek, the architect of illusion. Born in Vienna, he was an enigma from the start, a high school dropout who found his calling in the burgeoning chaos of the early internet. He possessed a rare fluency in the gray areas of the digital economy, a space where fortunes could be made by those who moved fast and asked few questions. His motive was not just wealth. It was a deeper desire for influence, for access to the hidden levers of global power. He saw finance as a tool to enter the far more thrilling world of intelligence and geopolitics. On the other side stood a small, scattered group of Davids against this Goliath, investigative journalists and skeptical short sellers. These were people like Dan McCrum at the Financial Times, individuals trained to see what others miss, to question the stories that seemed too good to be true. Their world was one of verifiable facts, of cross-referencing documents and trusting the numbers only after they have been proven. Their motive was the truth. They saw a company whose explosive growth defied logic and whose accounting practices were shrouded in an impenetrable fog. The first act of this long war began in the year 2000, in a small office in a Munich suburb. This was Wirecard in its infancy, a company processing payments for the internet's seedy underbelly, online gambling and adult entertainment websites. It was here that Jan Marsalek found his perfect training ground. He learned how to navigate regulatory ambiguity, how to structure companies in offshore jurisdictions, and how to create the appearance of legitimacy for businesses that operated on the fringe. He was building the foundational skills for a fraud that would one day be worth billions. The collapse of Wirecard was more than just the failure of a single company. It was a seismic event that exposed a deep rot at the heart of the European financial system. Jan Marsalek's fraud was not conducted in a vacuum. It was enabled and protected by a system that desperately wanted to believe in the story he was selling. The larger theme at play was the dangerous allure of a national champion. For Germany, a country whose economy was built on industrial titans, Wirecard represented a bridge to the digital future. This desire was so powerful that it created a collective blindness among the very institutions meant to act as watchdogs. The concrete stakes were astronomical, measured in tens of billions of euros in evaporated market value. But the real consequences were paid by ordinary people. Pension funds across Europe saw their holdings turn to dust overnight. A generation of German retail investors, encouraged by the patriotic narrative of backing a domestic success story, lost their life savings. The ripple effects were global. Major investment funds in the United States, Japan, and across the world were forced to write down massive losses, their own due diligence processes exposed as woefully inadequate. The consequences for Germany's national reputation were severe. The country had long prided itself on its meticulous regulatory environment and intolerance for corporate malfeasance. The Wirecard scandal obliterated that image. The German financial regulator, BaFin, came under intense international criticism. Instead of investigating the serious allegations against Wirecard, they had actively targeted the journalists and short sellers who were trying to expose the fraud. This catastrophic failure of oversight led to a complete overhaul of the agency and triggered a parliamentary inquiry that grilled top politicians, including the finance minister and even Chancellor Angela Merkel, who had personally lobbied for Wirecard in China, unaware that she was promoting a hollow shell. The scandal also revealed a startling naivety within the German political and intelligence establishments. Marsalek had cultivated relationships at the highest levels, presenting himself as a valuable, if unofficial, asset. He met with senior officials from Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service and boasted of his operations in Libya. The consequence was that the German state was not just fooled by a fraudster. It was infiltrated and manipulated by a man who was likely working for Russian intelligence services all along. The Wirecard saga became a brutal lesson in modern hybrid warfare, where the lines between corporate power, financial markets, and espionage are dangerously blurred. The confrontation between Jan Marsalek and his critics was a battle over the very nature of truth. The conflict exposed the vulnerability of our systems to a compelling narrative, especially when that narrative aligns with our deepest hopes. Marsalek did not just sell payment services, he sold a story of European technological sovereignty. This narrative was so intoxicating that it acted as a powerful anesthetic, dulling the critical faculties of investors, auditors, and regulators alike. They needed the story to be true. This created an environment where hard evidence was dismissed and skepticism was treated as a form of sabotage. Jan Marsalek's primary weapon was not denial, but accusation. His strategy was to portray Wirecard as the victim of a vast criminal conspiracy led by journalists and financial speculators. Every time a critical report surfaced, the company would issue a furious rebuttal, not with evidence, but with threats of legal action. Marsalek's reaction was to go on the offensive, using the German financial regulator, BaFin, as his unwitting attack dog. This strategy, however, contained a fatal flaw. It assumed that facts could be permanently suppressed by power. The first major strike came from within. The setup was Wirecard's miraculous Asian business, which supposedly generated immense profits through a network of opaque third-party partners. In early 2019, the Financial Times received a trove of internal documents from a whistleblower inside Wirecard's Singapore office. These were the receipts. One narrated receipt was a spreadsheet detailing a plan for round-tripping, a classic accounting fraud where money is shuffled between subsidiaries to create the illusion of legitimate revenue. The strike was the publication of the House of Wirecard series, which laid out the internal evidence of the fraud for the world to see. The reaction was explosive. Instead of raiding Wirecard, German authorities launched a criminal investigation into the journalists who broke the story. BaFin took the unprecedented step of banning investors from making new bets against Wirecard stock, effectively shielding the company from market scrutiny. Marsalek's attack seemed to be working perfectly. He had successfully used the German state to punish the truth-tellers. But the strike had landed. The next setup was to dismantle the very foundation of Marsalek's Asian miracle, the third-party partners themselves. The journalist began a methodical global takedown. An investigator visited the registered headquarters of a major partner in the Philippines, a firm supposedly handling vast sums of money. He found not a bustling financial services office, but a private family home whose residents had never heard of Wirecard. The investigators then pulled the corporate records for another key partner. The receipts showed that the man listed as the trustee, the individual responsible for overseeing hundreds of millions of euros, had been officially declared dead several years earlier. Yet, he continued to sign documents featured in the company's financial reports. This was not a clerical error. It was a ghost signing off on ghost money. The reaction from Wirecard was a wall of silence. The narrated receipts were now a mountain of evidence, each one a brick removed from the facade of his corporate empire. The methodical takedown had cornered him. The next setup was not another journalistic investigation. It was a final, unavoidable reckoning demanded by investors, a full, independent audit by KPMG. The stage was set for the final collapse. Marsalek's defense was built on a foundation of aggressive misdirection. He believed he could outmaneuver the auditors, just as he had outmaneuvered regulators for years, by burying them in useless data and intimidating them with his supposed intelligence connections. This arrogance was his greatest flaw. He failed to understand that while regulators can be influenced, a forensic audit is a relentless search for verifiable proof. The battle now entered its final desperate phase. The core of the conflict centered on a single stubborn demand: prove the existence of 1.9 billion euros supposedly held in escrow accounts in the Philippines. The first micro-scene of this endgame took place in the digital inboxes of the auditors. After weeks of delays, they finally received scanned PDF files of bank statements and balance confirmations. At first glance, they looked official, but under scrutiny they fell apart. The bank letterheads were slightly pixelated, clear signs they were copied from a website. The signatures on different documents, allegedly from different bank officials, were uncannily similar. It was amateur work. The auditors went directly to the source. A tense call was placed to Manila. The response was swift and devastating. An official from one of the banks stated plainly, "Wirecard is not a client. We have no record of these accounts. The documents are fraudulent." This revelation triggered a new level of panic inside the conspiracy. A frantic video call connected Munich to a small office in Dubai, the hub of Wirecard's Phantom Asian business. A senior executive was instructed to create a retroactive paper trail for hundreds of millions of euros in transactions that never happened. He had to invent clients and forge invoices in a matter of days. Marsalek's charisma had a coercive edge. His network was held together not just by greed, but by the fear of what would happen if the machine ever stopped. He was not asking for help. He was giving an order. A global crisis then intervened. Wirecard's longtime auditor, Ernst & Young, insisted on an in-person verification in the Philippines. A flight was scheduled. Then, the pandemic grounded international travel. The flight was canceled. For the fraudsters, it was a moment of pure, unearned luck. But it was a temporary stay of execution. The auditors pivoted, demanding video calls with the Filipino bank managers. When Marsalek's team produced a person on a video call claiming to be a bank employee, a quick search using facial recognition software revealed the man was actually a local tour guide who had been paid to read a script. The lies were becoming more brazen, more pathetic. The war for the truth had been won, but the villain had not yet surrendered. In the days following the devastating findings of the special audit, an eerie calm settled over Wirecard's headquarters. The 1.9 billion euro hole in the balance sheet was now an open secret within the company's inner circle. The first scene of this finale took place in a glass-walled boardroom. The CEO, Marcus Brown, was a man broken, his entire worldview shattered. All eyes turned to Jan Marsalek. He met their panicked gazes not with fear, but with an almost serene confidence. This was not a case of fraud, he suggested, but a sophisticated conspiracy against Wirecard. The Asian trustees had stolen the money. It was a masterful performance, designed not to convince, but to confuse and delay, buying him precious hours. His next move was even bolder. As the company prepared to issue a press release that would crater its stock price, Marsalek offered a dramatic solution. "I will handle this," he declared. I will fly to Manila myself. I will meet with the central bank governor. I will force these local banks to show us the money. This was the ultimate deception. He was creating a false flight plan, a public narrative of a CEO rushing to solve a crisis, while privately plotting his own escape. He even had his staff book him a commercial flight and a hotel in the Philippines, creating a digital trail that led directly away from his true destination. While the financial world was now focused on a phantom mission to the Philippines, Marsalek returned to his office. There was no frantic shredding of documents. Instead, eyewitnesses described a man who was methodical and calm. He cleared his desk and began transferring vast sums of cryptocurrency from corporate accounts into his own private digital wallets. This was not the withdrawal of a desperate thief. It was the calculated asset liquidation of an intelligence operative changing identities. He was erasing Jan Marsalek, the COO, to make way for whatever came next. The final act was split across 2 locations. In Munich on June 18, 2020, Wirecard finally made its public admission. The company announced that its auditor could not confirm the existence of the 1.9 billion euros. The house of cards collapsed in an instant. The stock price plummeted by over 90%. But as the news alerts flashed across screens globally, Jan Marsalek was not in his office. He had been chauffeured across the border to a private airfield near Vienna. He boarded a chartered Cessna jet, its flight plan logged for Minsk, Belarus. The criminal mastermind was already airborne, flying into the arms of the very intelligence networks he had cultivated for years, leaving a generation of investors to pay the price for his grand illusion. The implosion was instantaneous. The fallout began with the markets, a digital massacre unfolding in seconds. We see trading screens flashing red, the Wirecard stock symbol followed by a staggering minus 99%. It was a complete and total wipeout. In the days that followed, court-appointed administrators swarmed the company's headquarters, conducting a corporate autopsy on a crime scene worth billions. The firm officially filed for insolvency, becoming the first-ever member of Germany's DAX index to go bankrupt. The viral reaction was a tidal wave of betrayal. On financial forums, threads that once cheered Wirecard's every move were now filled with tales of ruin. Former employees began to speak out, posting anonymous stories of a toxic corporate culture where questions were punished. The phrase Jan Marsalek sightings began to trend, a mix of dark humor and genuine speculation, with doctored photos placing him in increasingly absurd locations. It was the internet's way of grappling with a villain who had become a ghost. The political fallout was just as brutal. The scandal reached the very top, with newspaper front pages questioning Chancellor Angela Merkel's judgment for promoting the company on a state visit to China. The narrative became one of national failure. The fallout entered the courtroom, but with a glaring omission. The trial began in Munich. We see former CEO Markus Braun, once a celebrated visionary, now a defendant facing a panel of judges. We see other senior executives in the dock. But the central figure, the man who ran the operations at the heart of the fraud, is absent. His empty chair is a silent testament to his escape, a ghost haunting the proceedings. The institutional fallout metastasized globally. The auditing firm, Ernst & Young, faced a firestorm of lawsuits from investors who accused them of a decade of negligence. The scandal triggered a crisis of faith in the entire auditing industry, raising a terrifying question. If a fraud this large could go undetected for so long at a major German company, where else might it be happening? The global manhunt intensified, moving from a police matter to a full-blown intelligence operation. We see grainy satellite photos of a compound outside Moscow, one of several locations where Marsalek is rumored to be hiding under the protection of Russia's security services. His escape was not a panicked flight, but a successful exfiltration. The aftershocks of the Wirecard earthquake continued to reshape the landscape. In Germany, lawmakers passed the Financial Market Integrity Strengthening Act, a massive overhaul of accounting and auditing rules designed to prevent another Wirecard. But for many, it was a case of closing the barn door after the $20 billion horse had bolted. The fallout created a deep freeze across the European technology sector. Venture capitalists, once eager to fund the next European tech champion, became cautious and skeptical. Marsalek's fraud had poisoned the well for an entire industry, a long shadow of distrust cast over genuine innovators. As of 2025, Jan Marsalek remains a ghost, a fugitive protected by the very intelligence networks he cultivated. He is believed to be in Moscow, a symbol of a crime without consequence for its architect. The Wirecard saga is a chilling lesson in how charisma and national pride can be weaponized to dismantle trust in our financial systems, revealing a dark world where corporate fraud and espionage are one and the same. While the puppet master is free, his CEO was left to face the music. To see the man now on trial for the missing billions, open the on-screen card to watch Tema 2. Marcus Brown, Wirecard, ongoing 2025 trial, billions missing, the collapse of Germany's fintech champion. Now,